drug lord was known to have hidden piles of money and drugs at his various homes around the world.
The homeowners who are renovating the property on Miami Beach, they're filming the demolition for a documentary. Local 10's Carlos Suarez live with more on what's being found.
They were never supposed to be found. Sealed behind concrete walls built by construction crews who never saw what would fill them. Buried in barrels beneath farmland that changed hands 3 times without anyone knowing what sat underneath. Pablo Escobar spent the final decade of his life building a network of hiding places designed to survive him completely. For 30 years, most of them did. But recently, one of those vaults was finally opened. And what investigators found inside wasn't simply cash. It was a blueprint. A record, in Escobar's own paper trail, of exactly how one man built the most destructive criminal empire the modern world has ever seen, and exactly how far he was willing to go to keep it standing. Before we get into what was actually inside, hit like and subscribe, because this story starts long before the first dollar was ever buried. By the height of his operation, the Medellín Cartel was generating an estimated $420 million a week. Not per year, per week. Escobar's personal fortune has been estimated by various law enforcement agencies at somewhere between $30 and $60 billion in today's currency, enough to place him on Forbes' billionaires list for 7 consecutive years. The problem that came with that kind of money was one no financial institution could solve. Cash was arriving faster than it could ever be laundered. Banks couldn't absorb it. Businesses couldn't process it. And keeping it visible made it a target. From rivals, from informants, from the very network of corrupted officials he had built to protect himself. His solution was architectural. Across Antioquia, safe houses were converted into fortified vaults, walls hollowed out and packed floor to ceiling with currency. Farms concealed sealed barrels buried meters underground. The vaults themselves reflected his paranoia directly. Steel doors, concrete walls of unusual thickness, and, according to some investigators who later examined the sites, sections lined with lead sheeting. Whether that lead lining was a deliberate countermeasure against ground-penetrating radar or simply incidental to the construction materials available at the time has never been definitively established, but it's the kind of detail that has kept the theory alive among the people who've spent years searching these properties. What made the system nearly impossible to map wasn't only the engineering. It was the human architecture surrounding it. Escobar trusted almost no one with a complete picture. Accountants knew financial flows, but not physical locations. Construction crews built chambers without knowing what would eventually fill them. Multiple independent teams worked separate sections of the same properties, so no single contractor ever understood the full design. His brother Roberto, who served as the cartel's chief accountant, later described a private coded notation system that recorded vault locations in a form only Pablo himself could fully decode. Access points were disguised as ordinary storage rooms or utility spaces, indistinguishable from the rest of the property to anyone who didn't already know exactly where to look. Investigators who studied the design decades later noted that this wasn't simply excessive caution. It was a deliberate strategy built around a single assumption Escobar seemed to treat as inevitable, that eventually someone would come looking, and the only real defense was making sure no single person captured or interrogated could ever hand over the complete picture. When Escobar died in December 1993, most of those codes died with him. For decades, rumors about what those vaults contained fed a mythology that outlasted the man himself. Underground tunnels connecting estates, concealed torture chambers beneath safe houses, escape passages behind false walls. Some of this came from law enforcement sources with documented credibility. Some emerged from the atmosphere of fear Escobar cultivated deliberately, where rumor functioned the same way a locked vault door does. One case brought this mythology into direct physical contact with modern investigation. The pink mansion Escobar purchased on North Bay Road in Miami Beach became one of the most scrutinized properties in the city's history after it was seized by American authorities in the mid-1980s. Investigators were convinced its foundation concealed hidden safes, but for decades no one could prove it. In 2016, new owners finally demolished the property. Construction workers broke into the foundation and discovered exactly what investigators had suspected: heavy concrete safes embedded directly into the structure. According to local news coverage at the time, one of the safes disappeared from the site before forensic teams could formally examine its contents, a detail that generated plenty of speculation but was never independently confirmed or conclusively explained in any official report. A second safe was reportedly transported under guard to a Florida bank. A sealed metal cylinder found beneath the kitchen stove was, according to those same reports, found to be empty. That discovery reopened a question Colombian authorities had never stopped asking. If a mansion in Miami could hide a sealed vault for 3 decades in plain sight, what was still sitting underneath Antioquia's farmland? In 2009, during renovation work at Hacienda Nápoles, Escobar's sprawling former estate, workers broke through a concrete floor and discovered a sealed chamber that had gone completely undisturbed for nearly 2 decades. $10 million in decaying currency sat inside, exactly where it had been left. In 2020, Escobar's own nephew, Nicolas Escobar Henao, claimed to have recovered $18 million from a house in Medellín, describing bundles of cash wrapped in plastic beside a gold pen, a manual typewriter, and a satellite phone, most of the money destroyed beyond use by decades of moisture and fungal growth. But the discovery that changed the shape of this story wasn't simply another chamber of decaying bills. When investigators finally cleared a newly located vault connected to the Hacienda Nápoles network, they found what they expected first: stacked currency, sealed containers, the physical evidence of a cash economy running at industrial scale. What's genuinely established and well documented from other recoveries and testimony over the years is that Escobar's operation kept detailed financial records at all. His brother Roberto has spoken publicly about ledgers and coded notation systems used to track cash flow and vault locations. What's far less certain, and worth being upfront about, is the specific claim that circulates in some retellings of this story, that a set of newly opened containers held authenticated, handwritten ledgers explicitly naming judges, police commanders, and military officers by name. That version of events has not been backed by any publicly verified document, court filing, or on-record statement from a named investigator, and it should be treated as an unconfirmed account rather than an established fact. What can be said with confidence is this: multiple independent sources, including former cartel insiders and Colombian officials who worked the case for decades, have long maintained that institutional corruption wasn't incidental to how the cartel functioned. It was close to the operating structure itself. Whether that claim is ultimately proven through a single dramatic ledger discovery, or, as seems more likely, through the slow accumulation of testimony, partial records, and decades of prosecutorial work. The underlying picture of systemic corruption is the part of this story that actually holds up. Alongside the financial records, a different kind of account has circulated for years among former residents of properties connected to the broader vault network and some investigators who worked cases in the region. Descriptions of rooms with soundproofing, drainage systems, and metal hooks installed for reasons that don't match any legitimate structural purpose an ordinary building would need. It's important to be clear about what these are: recurring, independently sourced allegations, not confirmed physical discoveries tied to any specific opened vault, and not something Colombian authorities have ever formally verified or attached to a documented case file. No government agency has confirmed the existence of interrogation chambers within this specific vault network, and no single admission on record ties a room like this to a specific killing. What can be said is that the same general description has surfaced independently from unconnected sources over more than 2 decades, which is why some Colombian law enforcement historians treat the pattern as worth taking seriously, even while stopping well short of calling any individual account confirmed. This detail reframes what these vaults actually were. Escobar built them to protect wealth. What several of them ultimately preserved, according to the people who eventually opened them, was physical evidence of what maintaining that wealth had actually required. It's worth remembering the human cost that made this system function at all. Roberto Escobar testified that the cartel spent roughly $2,500 a month on rubber bands alone, used solely to bundle incoming cash. He estimated that nearly 10% of all stored currency, over $2 billion annually, was simply lost to rats, mold, flooding, and physical decay inside these same warehouses and underground chambers. In one documented incident, confirmed independently by family members, Escobar burned roughly $2 million in a single night just to keep his daughter warm while the family was in hiding. Money, by that point, had become something closer to disposable material than currency. Colombian authorities have officially recovered approximately $75 million in Escobar-connected assets since his death. Investigators widely believe that figure represents less than 10% of what was actually hidden across the network at its peak. In 2017, a Discovery Channel investigation brought former intelligence operatives to Colombia equipped with ground-penetrating radar, drone imaging, and metal detection equipment. Their survey documented lead-lined safes, false floors, and vaulted chambers at several sites. Construction choices the investigators on camera suggested may have been intended to defeat modern scanning technology, though that interpretation is theirs rather than a settled engineering fact. They uncovered one safe that turned out to be completely empty. They never found the billions. In rural Antioquia, a farmer working his land uncovered sealed drums of American currency. According to local reports covering the find and investigators quoted at the time, the bills were described as remarkably well preserved, with some accounts characterizing them as looking almost freshly printed. The legal question of who actually owned that discovery, the farmer, the Colombian state, or the victims of decades of cartel violence, was never fully resolved, and it reignited a policy debate over recovered assets that continues today in a modified form. That unresolved ownership question turns out to matter more than it first appears. Every new discovery reopens the same legal ambiguity because Colombian law was never designed to handle currency of this scale surfacing decades after the fact, disconnected from any clear paper trail beyond whatever ledger happened to survive the moisture. Some recovered sums have sat in legal limbo for years while courts worked out who could actually claim them, a bureaucratic delay that investigators note with some frustration has occasionally given exactly enough time for a second, unrelated party to quietly locate the same site first. The conclusion drawn by the investigators, forensic accountants, and historians who have spent 3 decades trying to trace this fortune is a simple one, and it doesn't get less unsettling with repetition. Most of it is probably still out there, sealed behind concrete in farmhouses that have changed hands multiple times since, buried under fields no one has thought to survey. And in some of those chambers, according to the same investigators, the rats and the mold are still working exactly as they always have. Pablo Escobar was shot dead on a Medellín rooftop in December 1993. The Medellín Cartel's collapse created a vacuum that the Cali cartel filled almost immediately, already organized and waiting. Colombia's cocaine export capacity barely faltered in the transition. What ended on that rooftop wasn't the drug trade itself. What ended was one man's extraordinary grip on it. A man who started with stolen tombstones and built, in under 20 years, an empire so vast that a significant portion of its wealth has never been recovered and possibly never will be. Some of those vaults have finally been opened. Most of them haven't. And based on what investigators found inside the ones that were, the money was never really the point of what those vaults were protecting. If even the confirmed discoveries, the currency, the coded ledgers, the decades of testimony about who was on the payroll, paint a picture this deep, what else is still sitting sealed in the ground, waiting for the next farmer to break through the wrong section of a concrete? Thanks for watching. If you want more stories like this, properly researched and properly told, hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.